I'm Shumana Silian Saba. I am with the City of Los Angeles Civil, Human Rights, and Equity Department. Honorable Mayors, Mayor Garcetti, Undersecretary Zia, on behalf of our partners and co-hosts at the Strong Cities Network, Violence, Inequality, and Power Lab at University of San Diego, McCain Institute, Arizona State University, and our partners at the State Department, Office of Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, I welcome you all to our roundtable on promoting an integrated city-led approach to violence prevention, sharing lessons and good practices across the Americas. As we start our program, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. We do have media with us for the first portion, our opening remarks. The rest of our time will be private, and our conversations will be under Chatham House rule. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we delve into our conversation. So as we begin our sessions, and before we go into our conversations, I do want to share with you that our agenda today was a result of a virtual roundtable that we hosted on May 17th with 50 participants from across the Americas. And it is their input that shaped our agenda for today and also shaped the proposed tenets, which are largely based on understanding of democracy, upholding human rights, and understanding the impact of violence and the power of collaboration and networks across our international cities. Before we go into the details, I would like to welcome Brett Steele with the McCain Institute and our host at Arizona State University. Brett has been a leader in this space for many years, but has been an amazing partner that I got the opportunity and the pleasure to work with over the many years. Brett.
Thank you, Jumana. So good morning, honorable mayors, undersecretary, and community leaders. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Arizona State University, California Center on behalf of the McCain Institute and Arizona State University. Our topic today is promoting an integrated, city-led approach to violence prevention, and I think we can all agree that this topic could not be more timely than ever. As we share lessons learned and promising practices across the Americas, I hope we will take the opportunity to learn from one another and forge lasting partnerships. City-led approaches to violence prevention are essential to meet our constituents where they are, build inclusive processes that respect civil rights and civil liberties, and integrate multidisciplinary approaches to all forms of violence plaguing all of our communities. As city budgets are stretched in ever-increasing directions, prevention that's integrated across all forms of violence allows us to build the largest coalitions and have the greatest impact in keeping our communities safe. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Brett. Our next speaker is someone who's been a leader in the city for many years, someone that I have the honor and the pleasure to work with. Our inaugural executive director of the first ever Civil, Human Rights, and Equity Department, Capri Maddox.
Thank you so much, Jumana, for your leadership and for bringing this important event together today. I really want to also thank Undersecretary Zia for being here, in addition to the other mayors that are here. When we say mayor today, many people will turn around, Mr. Mayor Garcetti. I especially want to thank our co-hosts from Strong Cities Networks, the Violence, Inequality, and Power Lab at the University of San Diego, the McCain Institute here at ASU. We are so grateful for you sharing this space with us, and our State Department colleagues and partners. The Civil, Human Rights, and Equity Department, also known as LA Civil Rights for short, is a new department with the City of Los Angeles. We were created by Mayor Eric Garcetti and the City Council in 2020 to maintain and strengthen diversity, equity, and accountability here in the City of Los Angeles. This is the first time the City of Los Angeles has taken an active and intentional role in addressing inequality, and we certainly have our work cut out for us. We started by launching the first ever, the largest hate crime prevention campaign in the city's history. It is the largest campaign, and it is in 18 languages, and our slogan is LA is for everyone. And we mean this even when we don't have guests from all over the world. But we have some of that information over here, so you can take some of our signs that are in many languages to let you know that we welcome all of Los Angeles here every single day. I wanted to let you know that we also started the Office of Racial Equity, which implements new ways to address systemic racism, as well as disparities in communities like food deserts, rampant pollution, also known as environmental racism, and we also want to address the digital divide. When we look at the work that we're doing, we also have another tool in our toolbox. Our discrimination enforcement arm will allow us to use our legal skills to fight discrimination by bringing cases against people who violate rights in the areas of commerce, education, employment, and housing. All of this work is new to our city, but it starts in rooms just like this one. The innovative strategies that you all develop today will be the policies in many cities tomorrow. So I hope you approach today with an urgency and optimism, because the old way of doing things just won't work. Hate and discrimination are rising, and we must rise as well. And with that, I want to motivate you all and let you know that you need to keep the faith and keep the fight. And now it is my great honor to introduce our mayor, who challenges us in the city to make the moment, not miss the moment. And he is making the moment by leading this global city. I introduce to you my boss, my friend, Mayor Eric Garcetti. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you, Capri, so much. Very good morning. Muy buenos días a todos. It's great to see my fellow mayors here. I hope you got some rest. I hope you had a good Los Angeles meal. I hope you explored some Los Angeles neighborhoods. And it's fitting that we're here in this lobby. And I want to thank Arizona State University, the McCain Institute, for partnering with our Department of Civil Rights, my office, the State Department, all of our law enforcement, interventionist community that are here, because this used to be the building of our second newspaper. The newspaper is kind of tough to survive, so that it no longer exists. But this was a place where a critical part of a democracy, a free press, literally lived and breathed for decades. And now that it's been repurposed as a space for us to also speak our opinions, our hearts, to have free speech, to protect democracy and freedom, is, I think, very fitting that we're here today. So thank you for bringing us to this iconic building, and welcome everybody to our City of Angels. This is a great day. I know a lot of heads of state, including our president, are arriving here today. But let me begin with a quote that I think a few of you whose background might be in human rights probably know, but I never tire of saying it. It's Eleanor Roosevelt. Since we started yesterday, remember, with a quote from LBJ when he said, on his toughest days as president, it could be worse, I could be a mayor. Well, today let's start with a little bit more of an inspiring quote. When Eleanor Roosevelt was tasked with helping to co-write the Universal Declaration of Human Rights after the horrors of World War II, asked the question, where, after all, do human rights begin? And she posed a question, are they in faraway places and distant lands? Because oftentimes we think about, oh, human rights are about other people, for those of us that live in democracy. But she answered, she said, in small places, close to home, so close and so small, they cannot be found on any maps of the world. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, and She talked about it's where we pray, it's where we work, it's where we live, that if human rights don't mean anything there, they can't mean anything anywhere. So the work that we do is intensely personal and global here today. And I think that as we gather for the 9th Summit of the Americas, hopefully we all leave realizing how much closer we are. We don't just welcome the world here during summits, we welcome the world here every single day. You will see the face of the world on the streets of LA. And being lucky enough to be a 3rd or 4th generation Angelino, growing up here, whenever I traveled the world, I saw the face of Los Angeles on the streets of the world. When we grow up in cities that are diverse, as we have in the Americas, we are comfortable with anyone, anywhere, at any time. But we have challenges to our safety, to our prosperity, to our health. That's why I'm so grateful to have this opportunities with mayors from across the United States in Guatemala, Trinidad, Costa Rica, Colombia. I said Colombia here. I went to Colombia, but it's Colombia. And so many others to share insights and strategies for doing some of our most urgent work, preventing violence in our cities. There are so many wonderful things that unite us. This is one of the tragic things that unites us, the violence that is endemic across the Americas. From the most developed cities to the most under-resourced cities, unfortunately, it is something that bonds us together. But thank you to everybody who is breathing peace and leading with love in our cities and in our hemisphere to show a different model. We can only count those we lose in our cities. We never get to count those that we save because they're still with us. We can't say for sure that that young man or young woman is alive today because of our work. We can only see the tragedies when we don't do our work well. But we know in our gut, we know in our bones that the work we do saves lives. We can see it statistically from year to year when we invest in the right models of policing, when we invest in prevention and intervention, when we invest in human development in a way that brings these pieces together, gender equity, the importance of education, after-school programs, and violence interruption from a trauma-informed perspective. But we know that the relationships that we seek our national leaders to build this week really depend on the work that we will do at the local level. Nations are made up of cities and communities and neighborhoods and households and individuals. And so, as I was just saying in Spanish to my dear friend, new mayor that I just met from Guatemala, alcaldes son ladrones. We are thieves. Thieves of good ideas that we borrow and we implement with the speed of light. National governments take many months and years to negotiate very important things. And they always call us and say, what are you doing in your city that we can maybe elevate up? It's a very special role that we have as local leaders. It informs the work that can be done at the national and international level. But whether it's finding a participatory budget program like we have here, something we learned about from Porto Alegre in Brazil, or whether it's a basic income program, which also came out of Latin America first, whether it's being inspired by the violence interruption work that we're seeing at the grassroots level in Central America or exporting to Central America, we know that we are tied together, not just law enforcement, not just the civil sector, not just local leaders, but also those people-to-people contacts that can change the world, giving people the resources they need to thrive. Whether that's providing jobs and recreation opportunities for young people, preventing against hate crime, racism, and discrimination against women, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, or making sure that we give budget power directly to the people that we serve so they can make the best decisions and create the best organizations from the ground up, oftentimes out of tragedy. We see mothers and fathers who have lost their children who become the most powerful advocates of all to interrupt gun violence, to interrupt gang membership, to interrupt the cycle of going in and out of prison. And I'm sorry, as I had to say yesterday, being the host mayor is the worst and best responsibility. I won't be able to be here for a lot of the discussion. Those smarter people from my team will be here. But you're in the expert hands of our Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department. So thank you again for making this happen and spending the time here. And thank you especially to our Department of State for being such a strong voice in this work. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Uzrazia, who is a legend, but also is here with us today, our Undersecretary who oversees civilian security, democracy, human rights. It's my favorite part of the State Department, and area I hope we get to work together soon in promoting throughout the world. But she really is somebody who brings together the very best of this country and the ties internationally that will promote a more violence-free, a freer, and a more democratic world. Please welcome our Undersecretary.
Good morning, buenos dias a todos y todas. Honorable mayors, Mayor Garcetti, thank you. Thank you for that introduction and for your leadership. I also want to thank the City of Los Angeles, the Strong Cities Network, University of San Diego's Capri Institute, and the McCain Institute for inviting me to join this vital discussion. Today's gathering reflects the importance we all place on supporting violence prevention efforts across the Americas. I'm eager to listen and share what the Biden-Harris administration is learning and doing to strengthen efforts here in the United States and throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. As we all know, a worldwide violence epidemic impacts communities across the globe, including here in the United States and throughout this hemisphere. According to Insight Crime, the Americas have 47 of the world's most murderous 50 cities, and the trafficking of firearms is a major problem. Despite these daunting challenges, though, there's reason for greater optimism. Research has shed light on evidence-based strategies to prevent and reduce violent crime and gang-related violence by establishing a greater balance between the public health and law enforcement aspects of civilian security. Cities and communities across the United States and Latin America and the Caribbean are learning the hard way over decades that you can't arrest your way out of the problem. We know this because evidence indicates that urban violence tends to be concentrated in particular street corners and is often committed by a small number of individuals, especially young men. It's associated with certain high-risk behaviors, such as carrying a gun, substance abuse, and belonging to a gang. In most major cities, only 0.5% of the population is responsible for 75% of the homicides. So the most effective strategies to reduce homicidal violence must focus on where violence happens, who is involved, and how those involved are behaving. These findings have informed State Department and USAID responses to citizen security programming throughout the Americas. For our Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, INL, this has meant support for community policing, building data collection systems, training law enforcement in investigations, and a combination of youth police engagement. USAID also takes a community-focused approach, working with municipalities aimed at preventing the recruitment of youth into gangs and delinquent behavior. At the same time, governments throughout the Americas are investing in the rule of law and social programs as a long-term strategy. So how can we apply these lessons learned to turn the tide, to work more collectively and ultimately more effectively to reduce violence in our hemisphere? Allow me to put forth 5 ideas. First, we need to prioritize a public health approach to dealing with all forms of violence. Years of research spearheaded in the Americas indicate that the most impactful and cost-effective violence prevention efforts combine a public health approach with building criminal justice capacity. Under this logic, violence is treated as a disease with careful diagnosis of those infected in hotspots, targeted interventions to interrupt the transmission of violence, and preventive measures to keep those at risk from infection. We also must push back against violent and hateful narratives, and I want to commend the important work being done by the City of Los Angeles, directed towards racial and ethnic minorities, immigrants, women, and members of the LGBTQI+ communities. Such hatred has fueled a horrific rise in racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, what we in the US government call REMV, from Buffalo to El Paso, from Pittsburgh to Quebec City to Christchurch. 2, violence prevention requires data-driven diagnosis with clear metrics for success. We know it's important to collect data for hotspot mapping, to differentiate risk levels, explaining why small groups of mainly young men are more likely to join gangs or carry out delinquent behavior. Similarly, we should be using the latest research on behavior change to build community trust in police so residents report crimes, and to improve capacity to investigate and prosecute these crimes. Clear outcome indicators are crucial and should be linked to impact evaluations so that we can more rapidly scale up evidence-based violence prevention strategies. 3, strengthening the police is necessary, but it's not sufficient to address this region's violence epidemic. Instilling respect for rule of law and human rights is also critical. There has to be an ongoing conversation around abuses committed by security forces and ensure greater accountability when this takes place. A lack of trust between communities and police is one of the main impediments to improving security. So earning that trust is key, and it's best done when the police are seen as true protectors of the people's safety. 4, we need more capacity for those working on violence protection and prevention. Study tours right here to Los Angeles and other cities have been instrumental for US government and other international practitioners developing their know-how on how to address crime and violence. Ongoing exchange with and between experts to learn about what works in similar contexts is a must. But as we know, the implementation of violence prevention programs is not easy. It requires a high degree of technical know-how, extraordinary amounts of coordination among various agencies ranging from law enforcement to community service providers, and of course the funding to make everything happen. Law enforcement and service providers also need to be on the same page and share high degrees of trust. 5th and lastly, we need to be honest about the work we need to do here at home. We are experiencing the horrors of gun violence and mass shootings on far too regular a basis. So the United States global leadership is stronger when we honestly talk about and confront our own challenges with citizen security here at home. This is why the Biden-Harris administration has shown its commitment by proposing $5 billion for community violence programs in the United States and $4 billion for Central America to address the root causes of migration, including violence prevention programs and a holistic approach to security and counter-narcotics strategy throughout the region. This major investment presents a historic opportunity to vaccinate against violence, and it's an important move in the right direction. The pandemic of violence needs to end now, and we can and must get this done for all our futures. Thank you, and I look forward to the outcome of today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Zia, and thank you for laying out essentially the rest of our day, because these are the 5 priorities that you've just listed are going to be the bulk of our conversation, particularly as we look at how we can cultivate prevention solutions and uplift societal structures, including mental health and public health, and truly give capacity and capability and funding to those who are at the forefront doing this work. So we're so grateful for your remarks, and thank you for all that you are doing to make sure that we have what we need at the ground level for all of us here at the city.